stadium lights, the cricket buzz before halftime. My heart racing like it's 4th and 5 on a Midwest Saturday night.
Welcome to another episode of Mizzou Storytellers. I'm Dave Matter with Mizzou Athletics.
I'm Loretta Jones, also with Mizzou Athletics.
Yeah, this is our first episode since Roman Alexander,
Yes.
who you just heard,
Yeah,
open up the show.
I took the girls to listen to him at halftime.
Yeah.
That night at the basketball
He was
game.
great.
It was awesome.
He was really good. I didn't get a chance to get down and talk to him. I felt like I spent enough time with him earlier in the day. He
I
probably
was the same way.
probably didn't want to say. I drove him around earlier in the day. I think Roman was probably done with me, but he was great. Really
Yeah.
good.
That was really cool.
He was great, and then he definitely, we gave him some love on social media, and he reciprocated. And
Did you see also after that? I think you might have been the one who posted that David Nail did a little impromptu Missouri song on social media.
Yes, that's his song. I think he's got a song called Missouri.
Yeah, but
so
I don't think he's officially recorded it.
I think he's jumping on the bandwagon here, and he's seeing what we've done for Roman's career, and he wants
Just
to.
saying.
Yeah. We should get David Nail in here.
We should. I have started this infamous list that we've talked about for months and haven't done. I've started said list
Of
because
guests?
I've got of some people that I have that we can bring in.
Let's work on that.
I've got potential dates also.
Oh wow!
So
Are we talking letter winners?
yeah. That's my bread and butter. I don't have a whole lot of other connections.
We've got the big event coming up in June that where a lot of letter winners will be back here for, so we can. Is it June? June, July.
Well, now you got me thinking. Like, what am I?
Basketball.
Oh yeah, June.
Yes.
June.
Yes.
Yeah. June 14th, the Damari Carroll game.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. So, let's
Bowers,
let's
Damari
build some stuff
Bowers.
around that. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that's already out. So
Oh
we're
yeah,
not-
they're posting and
Lawrence
they've got
Bowers, Damari Carroll's All-Star game. I saw
Yeah.
DeMoy Hodge just said he was going to play.
yes, and so did so Alden Smith is coming, Demoy Hodge,
Marcus Golden.
Marcus Golden, Chase Kaufman, Evan Boehm. That's a home guy.
Yeah.
There's quite a few names. There was, man, that's gonna bug me now. There was one more that I just saw posted, and I was like, man, that's a name I
James
hadn't thought about in a
Franklin?
while. What?
James Franklin.
I saw
the
him,
quarterback.
but
What
yeah,
if we do a live podcast during the game or before the game? Not
that
during.
would be awesome.
Just bring them on. Kind of like we did the spring game last year.
I was not on the show at that time.
I know. It was a lot of wind. It was Corby Jones, Barrett Bannister,
But we'd be
and
inside.
a lot of wind. Yeah.
What day is it?
June 14th.
June 14th.
What are you doing, Steve, on June 14th?
I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow.
Check your calendar.
Oh, Ricardo Ratliff.
Ah.
He's coming
I
back.
bet he's probably still in really good shape.
Maybe.
He'll get a lot of rebounds.
They didn't
He was
post-
playing not too long ago, like in Korea or somewhere overseas.
But yeah. But all of this talk of letter winners and like all this nostalgia really kind of tees us up for today's guest.
Absolutely. Today's guest is he's got some stories. He is like
He remembers all
he
these
is like
guys.
the Mizzou. I should have gotten him a sweatshirt because he's like the Mizzou storyteller. And hopefully he's got some for us today.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah,
He's
well,
got
he
lots
always
of stories.
does.
Yeah, which ones are we going to hear today? Is what it is.
Yeah. This is like we should just call this one part 1. Part 2 we'll do sometime between now and June 14th.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. All right. So this is part 1 of our conversation with today's guest, whom you will hear shortly.
Sounds good. Let's go.
All right.
Tiger fans, say aloha to Hawaiian Bros, where the island-inspired flavors are positively delicious. You'll love favorites like huli huli chicken, luau pig, and the delectable Dole soft serve. Hawaiian Bros, just south of campus on Grindstone Parkway, or order at hawaiianbros.com.
He's a Tiger, he's a true son, he's a historian, and he is the Mizzou king of institutional knowledge. He is Bob Brendel, and he is today's guest on Mizzou Storytellers. Bob, thank you for making the long trek down to the studio here in historic Hearns.
Yeah, and I had to fight through the crowds to get there.
I think it's the shortest commute any guest has ever had.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are you going to put in a expense form for your mileage here for the trek you took to get here? You are one of the there's not many people that still call this their home work address,
Yeah.
but you are here and you are tending to the archives of Mizzou Athletics.
I think I'm in my fourth location in this building now.
You know it probably better than anybody.
Oh, I'm sure that's true.
Yes.
I could
yes.
tell you some stories about this building that maybe you don't want to hear.
Well, that's why we're here. It's Mizzou Storytellers.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. Well, we thought there's no sense in having a podcast about telling stories about Mizzou Athletics and the people of Mizzou Athletics unless we bring in the ultimate storyteller, and that's Bob, who's been here as long as anybody. If you add up both of your times here, but also you've seen just about everything and everyone that's come through here in the last. I don't want to date you, but
Go ahead.
since the 70s when you were a student here and then joined the department, so we can get into all that. But your college athletics is, we talk about this all the time internally. Your staff, my staff, it kind of hinges on the younger employees. You talk about the student athletes are all young, and a lot of our employees are really young. So sometimes there's a vacuum of institutional knowledge, but there's none of that when you inject Bob Brendel into a story or into any situation where you need that institutional knowledge, and it's a treasure to have that and have you as a resource here.
Absolutely.
Thanks. It's something that I've always been a student of Missouri history for years and years and years, and I've kind of always felt that Missouri's got a really proud history, but for a long time we never told anybody about it.
Yeah.
And if you lose your history, it's gone forever. So I think it's worth preserving, and there are so many stories about so many people who've been associated with this program over all of time.
Yeah.
That people need to know about.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one thing too, and I fight this in my role now, is on the surface level, people love to, when you talk about Mizzou athletics history, they love to bring up the flea kicker and the fifth down and the
I
times.
don't.
I know, because you're
Funny,
like the eternal
I
optimist.
may or may not have a note in here about the fifth down.
Because you've been here for so long, and you lived through those moments that kind of went in the history books and people think about. But like, there are so many great things that have happened too, and so many great things are gonna happen. That it's easy. It's like a crutch sometimes to dwell on those old storylines, and your experience and your knowledge of all the good things too are things that we need to celebrate more and talk about more, and all the historical figures that have come through here as coaches and athletes and administrators and all of that. So that's what I treasure most about just your experience and your knowledge.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. So let's get to it.
Yeah. So you obviously have a passion for sports, for Mizzou sports. I mean, really just the state of Missouri in general. You've lived here your whole life, correct?
Yes.
So how young did that passion for Mizzou start for you? For sports, for Mizzou, were you an athlete when you were younger? Did you dabble?
Kind of. Well, actually, I mean, my love for Mizzou started probably, I don't know, maybe my preteen years. And it came from reading the Post-Dispatch. I mean, I'm a South County St. Louis guy.
Lindbergh High School.
Lindbergh High School.
Yeah, same hood.
There you go.
And I read the sports section of the Post-Dispatch religiously. I mean, all the way down to the agate page with the box scores every day. And at that time, the St. Louis had two newspapers, so they had the Globe Democrat in the morning and the Post-Dispatch in the afternoon, and so you could get a double dose of everything. But I really started to love Missouri from reading Bob Brendel. He's a Missouri grad. He was the unofficial historian of Missouri for many, many years, and I collaborated with him on writing his book on a century of Missouri football back in 1990. But between reading the Post-Dispatch and then listening to broadcasts of football games while I was mowing the grass, with earphones in and a transistor radio in my back pocket, that's when I got to really love Missouri.
Yeah. And it's not just that you were here and you were part of it, but it's a passion too, and that I guess that is the kind of thing that has to kind of develop when you're younger, maybe before you get here, and then you get here and you're exposed to it all, as a student. So you were here in the journalism school in the early 70s.
Yeah. You got to, 1969, was a great Missouri football season.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about the time that I was thinking, where am I going to go to college? At the time, I wanted to be a civil engineer. And I wasn't really thinking about Missouri. I was looking at engineering schools all over the place. But then my senior year in high school came, and I realized I had to take trigonometry, and I realized I didn't really like math. So I switched gears and wound up in a journalism path. And after looking at a bunch of different schools there, it was obvious that why would you not go to the best one? So
Right.
yeah. And so my freshman year here was 71, which was Al Onofrio's first year as football coach. And, 2 years after we were in the Orange Bowl and had won the Big Eight, we went 1-10 that year. But we were in a bowl the next year, and then came all the upsets in the 70s. And, those kind of things just they gave you that feeling every week that it didn't matter who we were playing, Missouri could win.
Yeah.
And that feeling was there for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Until I came back to work here and eventually went through the dark period. But no, there's those moments of things that you just hang on, and you think we can win every week.
Sure.
So how did you went the journalism path, and all three of us did that, and you get there and you kind of take a look at what your options are, which sequence you want to take. How did you settle on magazine journalism?
Well, that is kind of a funny story. So, when I was in high school in St. Louis, and Dave will know, the suburban journals, at the time the South County Journal, they started a sports section for the first time. And they hired a sports editor, and their idea was they were going to hire correspondents at the various high schools to cover their events. And I was the first guy they hired, and I was the only guy they hired. So I was covering every event, every high school event, all over St. Louis.
Wow.
And eventually that led to, heck, I'd get to cover Cardinal games. I'd get to go to Blues games.
Oh, cool.
I was all over the place, and I loved that. I really did. But I really liked the graphic design and layout part of it. And I had done 2 or 3 years of newspaper work before I ever got here, and so I decided I'm going to branch out and do something different. So that's why I picked a magazine sequence. The funny thing is, though, is when I did have to take my reporting classes on the Missourian, I got turned down from the sports desk. So I wound up on the university administration beat, and I got to cover the board of curators for a year.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
that was a lot of fun.
That's almost the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, kind of. It is maybe now. I don't know.
So, did you ever work in the sports information office as a student?
No, and that's also kind of funny.
I don't know. I picture him being like the Rudy of the sports information department. Like he just keeps showing up and working like he's supposed to be there.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
We have a few of those.
I had no idea that there was even an opportunity to work over here. I never even considered it.
Yeah.
I never even looked into it.
Right.
And after I graduated, I was looking for a job, and I had a job interview in the Statistics Bureau of the NCAA,
Oh.
Wow.
and an interview to be a sports information director at Lincoln University in Jefferson City
Mhm.
on the exact same day.
Oh, wow.
So I went to Kansas City, then drove to Jeff City, had both interviews. I wanted the NCAA job. I didn't really want the job at Lincoln, but that's the one I got offered.
Yeah.
And at the time, my girlfriend at that time was still in school here. She was a senior. So I figured, what the heck, I'll take the job in Jeff City.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And while I was there, I was able to build up a relationship with Mizzou through friends I had, mainly Mark Fitzpatrick, and got to know Bill Callahan really well. And when Mark left the SID office to go back to grad school, he told me he was going to do that before he ever turned in his resignation.
Huh.
So when he left, I had my stuff in to Bill instantly.
Yeah.
And so by hook or crook, I wound up with the job here in 1980.
Wow.
But
wow.
it was all kind of an accident. It definitely was not on my radar. My career path was definitely not aimed at working in sports information.
Tell us about Bill Callahan. I was meeting with my staff last week, and it was kind of a reset for 2025. We all got back from holidays and everything, and I said, just trying to a little bit of a motivational speech. I said, you guys don't even realize this, but we are at the institution in the athletic department of the person who pretty much invented what we do for a living. Back then it was sports information. Now it's strategic communications. But Bill Callahan was a legend in the industry, and you know why much better than either of us or probably anybody listening. So, what about Mr. Callahan was so unique, innovative in how he was doing things, and what his legacy is?
Well, number one, integrity.
Mm-hmm.
He was a stickler. No cheering in the press box. I mean, we used to go through an elaborate speech at the beginning of every game, and I saw him remove people from the press box if they cheered. And if you had to be here, but back in the 70s and 80s, if you went to a game at Nebraska or Oklahoma, you definitely heard lots of cheering in the press box. And that never, ever happened here.
Yeah.
But he was without a doubt one of the finest writing SIDs ever.
Mm-hmm.
He could write so well. I mean, I remember he used to have a football player come into his office once a week, and he would interview them for a feature that would go in that next week's release. He would interview them in his office, and he would take notes on his manual Royal typewriter. He never wrote anything down, typed everything out. And he would, and then he would sit down, he'd write one page. And it was always such a great story. He always found the essence of that kid. And, we mailed out press releases then. There weren't any fax machines. There weren't any, we mailed everything, no email. And, newspapers around the state, especially the weeklies, they'd print word for word pretty much everything that we sent out.
Yeah.
And his features, of course, were always of great interest, and especially in hometown areas of everybody. But yeah, he was a fantastic writer. He built great relationships with the media all across the country, actually. And he built a legion of student assistants to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
He
That's
was
the
here.
key.
That hasn't
Okay,
changed,
he
has
came
it,
here
Dave?
in 1947, 48. He was here till 1985. He did not have a full-time assistant until 1977.
Dang.
So he was doing everything by himself. And so, he was focused on football, obviously, but he had to rely on students to do everything else. Now, we didn't have as many sports then, but still, there was a lot of work. And if you look through the list of people who worked for him as students, there's a lot of big name people who went on to other great things in journalism after they left here. But no, he was a great guy. One of my mentors, and somebody I always strove to try to reach his standards.
Well, and I would imagine coming from Lincoln University to Mizzou, there would have been some challenges, difference in size, number of sports. What were some of those challenges that you faced, and how did he help you through those?
Well, when I came here, I was the number 2 guy for football, so I did the game program. I ran the stat crew on Saturdays. I updated all the stats and stuff like that. But I was the number 1 guy in basketball, and I was the number 1 guy in baseball. And when I came here in 1980, we had just won the Big 8 basketball championship the year before. We had John Sunfold and Steve Stepanovich.
Pretty good.
Yeah, we were pretty good. And so I started on August 4th. So the entire month of August, all I had to do was put that football game program together. And that's all I could do. I couldn't work on anything else. And I remember him coming to me one time in September, and he said, "Bob, you better get started on a basketball media guide because it's going to come around faster than you realize." And yeah, he was right, because practice started October 15th. So I got that done, but I had to learn how to work with Norm, and that wasn't always easy.
That's a whole different challenge.
That's a whole other episode.
So, at the time we had a interview hotline. So basically, it was a phone number that had a tape recorder attached to it with an endless loop tape. And so 3 or 4 times a week, we would interview the football coach or an athlete or Norm or whoever, and we would put those on there. And then in our weekly press release, we would list who was going to be on what day. So radio stations or whoever could call in, and they could get an interview over the phone.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Writing this down.
Right?
Good idea.
Noted.
So we were about ready to start basketball practice, and I took the tape recorder and I went down to Norm's office, which was all the way at that end of the hall. And I sat down with him, and I asked a couple, and he didn't want to do it. I mean, it was obvious. His body language was, why are you bothering me with this? I don't want to do this.
His body language or his face?
So I asked him a couple of questions, and he started out, and he immediately uttered several choice 4-letter words to start the answer. And I was like, "Coach, this is an endless tape. I can't back this up and erase it. It has to run all the way through to start it over again." So it has to run for like 5 minutes, and I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs, and now he's really getting ticked off. And so I asked him the question, and he did exactly the same thing. And so I had to wait again, got all the way through, and he said, "This is just a waste of time, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I figured that out." So I turned the recorder off, headed back to the office. After that, I had to pick my spots carefully to when I asked to do a taped interview with Norm. But over time, we developed a great relationship. But that same year, I introduced at a banquet at a basketball tournament in Atlanta, and Norm introduced me as our SID, and he said, "You know what that stands for, don't you?"
Uh-oh.
And I was like, "Oh, what's coming?" He goes, "Son of a bitch in disguise." So
Writing that down.
Yep.
Wow. I mean, we could spend all day talking about telling Norm stories.
Right.
yeah,
So what were your made like you took over the department then in '85?
Five.
Yeah. So didn't you focus mainly on when I first crossed paths with you in the '90s? It was you were all football. Was that kind of what you took over then when you ran the department?
Well, at first, I tried to do football, basketball, and baseball, all three.
Wow.
And I did it for 2 or 3 years. About killed me. So luckily at the time I had my dearest friend and assistant, Jack Watkins,
Mm-hmm.
who saved my bacon many, many times. I finally gave him baseball, which he did a great job with.
I love that that's the one that you offloaded.
Yeah.
But-
football, basketball, baseball. I'm going to get rid of this one.
But I'll tell you what, though, maybe the most fun times I've ever had in my life were at Simmons Field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I dearly love college
No,
baseball.
I meant that's the one I would have held
Yeah,
on to.
I hated to give it up, but I had to because of the number of games and spring football
Sure,
conflicts and stuff like that. But I felt like, at first, but I can't give up basketball
Yeah.
because I think Norm deserves the number one treatment. I mean, at the time, he was keeping the department relevant.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we were winning.
Yeah.
And we were winning at a high level with lots of great players. So I kept doing basketball until, when? Early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So I did football and basketball both for a long time. And I continued, I only had 2 assistants. Eventually, I figured out a way to turn a secretary's position into another assistant and 2 GAs, and then eventually combined those GAs into one spot. So eventually, I did expand the department a little bit, but like Bill, I relied on a lot of students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot who went on have I'm proud of have gone on to great things at ESPN and various newspapers and other schools. So I mean,
Deputy AD at Missouri.
Right.
and yeah,
I mean, what better school to utilize the students,
Oh, for sure.
than the number one journalism school in the country?
oh, I had so many people apply all the time that I had to tell so many good people no
Yeah.
that sometimes I'd have people say, well, I don't care if you pay me, I'll do it anyway.
Wow.
And I was like, well, maybe we'll, because if you're paying somebody, you've got the ability to, hire. You could fire them, or but if somebody's volunteering and they might be inclined us to not show up or sleep in one Saturday morning. So, I did take some people like that, but I didn't like to do it very often because you had no accountability.
Mm-hmm. This was a good question, and Loretta wrote it in our script, and I think you and I have talked about this before. I probably interviewed you about it
I
before.
think it's the one that I was getting ready to
sorry.
ask. No, but I bet
Not
it
to
is.
like drag up bad memories, but like you obviously played an integral role on one of the most infamous days in college football history. And I'm not everybody knows what happened at this point, but I want to know like what was that like for you personally on the 5th down game against Colorado in 1990?
It was the worst day of my life. Oh man, the week before we had beaten Arizona State.
Yeah.
They were ranked. We beat them like a drum here, and here comes Colorado. And with time running down in that game, it looked like we were going to beat them, and maybe Bob Stoll's program was going to take off.
Yeah.
Back then, I'd hold the elevator with 3 minutes left in the game to take reporters to the field for post-game interviews. So with 3 minutes, actually, I think we held the elevator a little earlier than 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I got down on the field just in time. I walked into the south end zone right as Damon Mays catches a touchdown pass from Kent Kiefer and practically runs right into my arms. And that gives us the lead. And there's not much time left. I mean, I don't know, less than 2 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
So my habit then, and then Missouri's locker room was where the visiting locker room is now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it was a decrepit hole. I can tell you it was awful. And the only place you could do interviews in there was it was practically a closet inside the door. And it was so hot and cold. I mean, hot and humid in there and claustrophobic. It was awful. So what I would do is the first thing I'd do is I would go up there. I would try to make sure that that space that we did interviews was clean, because Lord knows what it had been used for at halftime. There'd be towels laying around and cups of, water cups and stuff. So I'd go up there, clean it all up, turn on the PA system, check the microphone, talk to Randy Hudson, who was assistant equipment manager, and he kind of ran the locker room. We'd go out and smoke a cigarette together.
As one does.
Yeah. So we're standing on the ramp underneath that goes from the locker room down to the field, and you really couldn't see the north end zone completely because of the overhang.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All I was watching was the clock,
Yeah.
and it was, counting down. I was like, I think Hud and I high-fived, game over, we've won. I head back into the locker room. And it's not very long, and the players start coming in. The first player in is Tim Bruton, who was a tight end.
Mm-hmm.
And I slapped him on the shoulder pads and said, "Hey, great win." And he goes, "Well, I can't repeat what he said."
That's all right. You can
But he
reply.
slammed his helmet into the wall. "We effing lost." And I was like, "What?" And so I go running out onto the field, and it's pandemonium. I mean, there's, there's students tearing the goalpost down. There's the officials trying to get the teams back on the field because they have to kick the extra point.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because if we block it and return it, it's 2 points and the game's tied again.
Right.
Well, obviously it was stupid because they weren't going to kick it. I mean,
Right.
Colorado, all they did was kneel on the ball. I've got my walkie-talkie on my hip, and I called Jack Watkins in the press box because he was running the stat crew.
Yeah.
I said, "Jack, what the heck is going on?" And Jack was like, Bob, you're not going to believe this. You're not. I knew what was going on. I tried to call the field. They wouldn't answer. We had a hotline phone for the official. They wouldn't answer the phone. I said, Jack, slow down. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. So I finally kind of figure out, okay, it's fifth down. So of course the media is they all want to interview the officials, and
How often does that happen?
the Big Eight had a pool reporter policy.
Oh.
But we had never had to invoke it before. So I'm like, oh my God. So the policy called for the reporters to pick one representative who would be their pool reporter. They had to be accompanied by me and a senior athletic department official, which was Joe Castiglione. And we had to have a tape recorder. So we go into the officials' locker room. Oh, Bernie Miklasz wound up being the pool reporter.
Okay.
We go into the officials' locker room, and I looked at those guys, and it was like they had all seen a ghost.
Oh gosh.
I mean, they were white as a sheet, and they didn't know what had happened. I mean, and they did not want to answer any questions.
That's not a good sign.
I mean, it was awful. It was really awful. And the worst part about it is Missouri had no recourse. You know, obviously, Dick Tamburo, the athletic director, he did appeal to the Big 8 commissioner, but you know, there's no recourse.
Right.
Then what made it worse was the way Bill McCartney, the way he handled it.
Yeah.
Because here he is, God rest his peace, because he
Yes.
just passed
He
away.
did.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a Missouri grad. He played here. After the game, all he wanted to talk about was how crappy the turf was.
Yeah.
And that was it. You know, Missouri people hated him for that.
Yeah.
All he needed to say was, Missouri played a great game, and we feel fortunate to win.
Yeah.
If he would have said that, everybody would have been fine. But no, he ragged and ragged and ragged about the OmniTurf. And granted, yeah, they were slipping and falling, but so were we.
Right,
Everybody
right.
slipped. Everybody.
Yeah.
It was like playing on an ice rink. You know, that was a terrible day. And then afterwards, I went home. My mother-in-law used to. She'd host family and friends after every game for a meal. And on the way driving out there, I heard Dave Platty, who is the Colorado
Yeah.
SID, on KMOX radio in St. Louis. And what I was hearing him say was making me madder and madder, and there was smoke coming out of my ears. So I got to my mother-in-law's house, and everybody's wanting to ask me, what the heck happened? I said, time out. I got to go straight to the phone. I went to the phone. I called KMOX, and I said, you guys just had Dave Platty on, and I said, I want equal time. And because he was saying the same stuff about the turf and everything. And KMOX did put me on, so I felt a little better. Then I turned, and a person who was at this party, whose name will not be shared, she launches into me about how bad a coach Bob Stoll was, and that just about did it. That was the end
Bob
of
lost it.
a really bad day, and I just walked out of the door. And we lived 3 doors down the street. I walked down the street, and
Oh.
end
man.
of story.
I think just that whole game is tough. You know, we talk about the youth and athletics. I think that's tough for people to understand
understand it.
nowadays how that could even happen, just with replays and reviews and, you know,
Technology, yeah.
yeah, and just watching. Shoot, what was it? Our game down at Florida. They had 9 play reviews.
Yeah.
You know, it's like everything is checked and double checked, and if there's even a slight doubt in someone's mind, they will review it and make sure. So it's
Yeah.
crazy to think
It's-
that would happen.
Prehistoric to talk
Yeah.
Well, here's the
Younger
most
generation.
amazing. Here's the most amazing thing about that. So that was the first year that we were testing out using a computer program to do the play-by-play and statistics in the press box. There was a guy in St. Louis. His name was Turk Lewis. He was a computer guru, and he was a big football stat guy who worked on the football Cardinals stat crew. And as a hobby, he developed a computer program to do the play-by-play and the stats. And he wanted to use our games kind of as a test balloon for his system, because then his plan was he was going to strike it rich and
Yeah.
sell it to everybody in the NFL and everybody else. So he would come to every game that year, and he'd bring his own computer. We didn't have any computers. He'd bring his own, and he would input it and everything. We still kept stats manually and everything, but we used his system. So when I looked at the play-by-play after the game, the last line says, it says 5-G-1. So 5th and goal at the 1.
Wow.
So I'm like, how in the world? So I called him up. I said, Turk, your system's great, but how in the world did you program it to accept a 5th down? Shouldn't the thing have
Right.
defaulted and said, this does not compute?
Blown up.
He goes, I didn't even know. I didn't even
Wow.
know. So
is
the
wild.
official play-by-play, which we've got in a file down the hall here, it says 5th and goal at the 1.
That's amazing. It's just unthinkable.
No.
It really is. While you're talking, I looked up. So I did a story one year. It was one of the anniversary years of the Fit Down. I did talk to Bill McCartney, and he did say, my regret is the way I deported myself after the game. So he did go on to apologize, but he said they needed a big victory. They needed a big victory bad. I can only have compassion for how they must have felt in losing like that, where somebody gets an extra down. Easy to say 20
Right.
years later.
Well,
And
we had-
when you
benefit.
won.
And you won the national championship that year also.
Yeah, and that's funny too, because in back in those years, the Big Eight was tied. The Big Eight was tied into the Orange Bowl. The Big Eight champion always went to the Orange Bowl, and the Big Eight used to send 2 SIDs to Miami to help the Orange Bowl committee every year. 2 from schools that obviously were not in a bowl
Playing
game. So that was one of. I did it twice. That was one of my years.
You're helping Platty out? Was he there?
No,
Oh.
I was the envoy to Notre Dame.
Oh, no. Okay.
So, yeah, Platty was there. But I got interviewed that week more than anybody because all of the national media had this narrative that Colorado was illegitimate, that they should not have been there, that they had actually lost a game, that they didn't belong in that game.
Yeah.
So, Notre Dame, great. That's Rocket Ismail on
Right.
that. So, similar thing. I go on the field late in the game, and I'm standing there, and I'm supposed to get quotes in the Notre Dame locker room. Time's running down. It's like 4th down. There's only one way Colorado can lose the game. Only one way. Punt it to Rocket Ismail. And that's exactly what they did. And he returned it for a touchdown that would have won the game. Called back on a penalty.
Wow.
And Colorado prevailed. They did win, and they wound up sharing the national championship with Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Man.
So, okay, we brought you down with the bummer story. Let's flash forward a few years. We had Brock Olivo on here last summer. Tell us about, maybe you can't share all the details, but what were those plane rides like? What were those games like when those teams in the late 90s, 96, 97 more so because that was the bowl year, but when they finally broke through, and you're part of that, and you saw all the stuff leading up to those years where things weren't great, but what was it like to be a part of it, but also just watch those guys, those teams, Coach Smith and Brock and Devin and Corby, like be able to be the team that broke through? Because those are years, and I say it all the time, they probably don't get enough credit because of because then things slid back a little bit
Yeah.
before Gary brought them back. But man, those years, and that's when I was in college. Those years were special.
Yeah. One of the things about those teams, or those years rather, we started every season with 2-a-days at Wentworth Military Academy. As much as I detested the living conditions there, it was a great opportunity for me to really get to know the team.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have anywhere to go. You were on that little campus in Lexington for a solid week, and you ate and slept and did everything with the team. So I got to know all that group of players, Brock and Devin and Corby and Mike Morris and all those guys.
Yeah.
I got to know that group really well because I was around them so much, even before the season started. And you could see the momentum building as Larry's program took root. one of his first things he felt was that, we had to become tougher than our opponents. And, he recruited all these linemen from small towns in Missouri,
Yeah.
Yeah.
corn-fed guys, that had dreamed their whole life of playing at Missouri. And he built everything around the run game. And, as that eventually took root, we became tougher than teams we were playing. And we would just wear them down.
Yeah.
There were, I think, both in 97 and 98, we had 4 guys who rushed for over 500 yards. 4. And of course, Brock Olivo's he's the spirit around which it all came together because of his work ethic and his eccentricities his workout eccentricities and everything. Brock running Brock's Hill and all that kind of stuff. But those were some the 2 games I remember most vividly is the 51-50 game at Oklahoma State,
Yeah.
where we had that game won. We were beating the tar out of them at halftime, and all of a sudden they come back in the fourth quarter and they take the lead, and with time running out, Corby Jones rainbow pass to Ricky Ross for over R.J. McQuarters, who was an All-American cornerback, for a touchdown to force overtime. And then in overtime, I remember, Marquise Gibson stopping their quarterback for a loss to win the game. And, 51-50. And you had to walk up a hill to Gallagher Iba Arena, which is where the visiting locker room was. And there was only one single door in. And so here's this big line of Missouri players trying to get through the door. And I patted Brock on the shoulder and said, great game. He bear hugs me, knocks me over backwards down in the grass. I was like, gee, thanks, Brock. I'm using his full gear. And then, the Colorado game that got us over the hump.
Yeah.
And that game, I cried at that game.
Yeah.
It'd been all those years, 14 years. And that game was the ultimate culmination of what Larry Smith wanted to do. Because the time of possession in that game, Missouri 40, Colorado 20.
Wow.
And then what happens the next week? The flea kicker.
Yeah. Okay, we're not going to go into that
Nope.
We don't have
Nope.
to go into that
We
one.
already visited one.
one. No, just one. Yeah. That's those were great. I was really impressionable because I was in college at the time and wanted to do this for a living, covering college football. So it was so cool to see it.
You said that about those teams not getting enough credit, and I kind of feel like Larry Smith doesn't get enough credit. Because when he came here in '94, he was the first football coach I ever saw here who approached coaching football here as leading a program and not a team. He had a plan for everything. He had notebooks on how to everything. He had facilities plans. He had nutrition plans. He had academic plans. He had a plan for everything. And we started handling the media differently.
Yeah.
With his experience from when he was at USC. A lot of things that he accomplished during his tenure here set the stage for things that happened later, because there were a lot of other mechanisms in place then that weren't before. He got the Divine, now obviously working with Dan Devine and Joe, the Divine Pavilion got built, the first renovations of the stadium, long-range plan for the press box, lots of things, so I know things went south at the end.
Yeah.
But he did a lot of great things here.
Yeah, more than ever, it proved you can do it here. You can
Yeah.
win here.
Oh, and Dan Devine, when he was rolling here, and Dan told me once when he came back as AD, he said, my biggest regret is when we were going great guns here in the 60s, I never asked for anything. In fact, the bowl revenue from the Orange Bowl in 1970, he gave it to the library.
Wow.
He said, I didn't realize how much facilities meant until I was at Notre Dame, and we lost a recruit to Michigan, a lineman, and I forget the name, but it's a famous name, and it's somebody who was like an academic All-American. He said he chose Michigan over Notre Dame, and I asked him why, and he said, because they had carpeting in their locker room. And he's like, that's when I realized that stuff was important, and I never asked for anything when I was here.
It's just things that you think about now that are just natural.
Yeah.
This episode of Mizzou Storytellers on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast is brought to you by Sophia's and Addison's Restaurants. Sophia's and Addison's Restaurants are great local spots to visit before or after all Mizzou home games. Addison's has 2 locations in Southwest and downtown Columbia and features over 20 beers on tap, including local brewers and, of course, their famous Nachos Bianco. So remember, before or after the game, stop by Addison's.
Yeah. That's amazing. So, Bob, your career takes a few different paths, and you spent 20 years at MoDOT.
Yes.
Is that right? And then we bring you back. I say we. I wasn't here yet, but Mizzou brings you back in 21. Is that right? 2021, because I think it was recognized there was kind of a gap in this institutional knowledge, and I think a lot of it's just a lot of turnover in the department, and smart people recognize that like you can bring some value. So, kind of just share with us like what is your how do you see your role here, and what value can you bring with all your experience and knowledge and memories and that passion too.
Aside from pulling photos for me
Well,
on,
that's a big
on the
part.
daily. So
Well, when I first came back, Nick Joseph at the time was here, and
Yeah.
he said, I need somebody to clean up the archives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, yeah, I can do that. But I remember saying to my wife, I said, how long could that last? 6 weeks?
For you.
And and I said, then what do I do? And she said, oh, just you'll like it. You'll have fun. So I had no idea what shape they were in.
Yeah.
Now, I can tell you when I left here in 2000, the archives were not in great shape, but if you knew what you were looking for, you could find it.
Yeah.
At least I could, because I knew where to look, and I knew the history.
Yeah.
But over the last 25 years, stuff had been stuck in boxes in every dusty corner of this building.
Yeah.
yeah.
And some stuff was over there. And, at Mizzou Arena. And the Sports Information Office had moved locations multiple times. And turnover, people would pull a file and didn't put it back. And I spent months going through every office up and down this hall, and I can tell you right for a fact, every filing cabinet I found something. And there is still lots of stuff missing that really galls me because I know it exists.
Yeah.
But Lord knows what happened over time. So I started out trying to go sport by sport, going through year by year and every individual athlete file. I've been through several thousand files, I can tell you. And I found photos that were misidentified. I found photos that belonged in somebody else's file
Yeah.
So I've made a lot of progress. Some of the request you make of me, Loretta, I guarantee you a few years ago could not have been filled.
I don't doubt that at all.
And so, and also, in the course of that, I have digitized a lot of stuff. So eventually, it all should be digitized, and then you can get rid of everything. But that would take forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the course of what I've done, I have digitized a lot. So now there is a lot of stuff that I have put on the server to be retrieved in the future. I've tried to offer some guidance or help to the young people on your staff, who I imagine, sometimes I think they tire of me talking to them. But they all, maybe they're lying, but they all say that that they appreciate it. And when I did stumble across things that I think are nuggets that we don't want to lose, I try to write them down. And so I have written a lot of vignettes on Missouri history that I learned things that I didn't know, and refreshed my memory on other things. And so, that I'll try. I'm trying to do whatever I can to help out. And like I said, I think Missouri needs to tell its story, its historical stories more, so that people appreciate some of the great history we have. And the North End Zone Project, the Centennial Project, is a perfect opportunity to showcase some of that history in a place that is going to be a showcase. That's part of the problem, is that we don't have any central focus of places to, we don't have a museum.
Right.
So, where do you display things? And, sometimes I think younger Missouri fans, younger alums, they don't think we even had football before Gary Pinkel, And other than Norm Stewart's signature on the court, they don't know who he is.
Right.
They don't know John Sunvold and Steve Stepanovich. I mean, but they need to know those people, And so whatever I can do to help, that's I'm a Missouri guy through and through. And even though Missouri didn't always treat me the way I felt I deserved to be treated, this is where my heart is, and I want the black and gold to win more than anybody.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's where you are such an asset to the department. Is now in my position, being here almost 3 years now, the amount of people that will reach out and say, "Hey, I have this old game film, or I'm cleaning out my house, and I have these things. What do I do with them?" And I think historically it was, I don't know, I guess I can throw it in a closet. Now I'm like, "Oh, I'll contact Bob. I'll see if we can do something with this. Do you already have this? Do we need this? How can we help?"
Yeah, some stuff I'm trying to figure out too. Things that we have duplications of that should go to the university archives and let them. And I have sent stuff over there, and they do have a lot of Missouri. They have a lot of stuff. They have all the old game film, going as much as there is, but ultimately, way after I'm gone, there's lots more work to do. It'll take time, but you just don't want to lose that stuff.
No, but we're lucky to have you.
Yeah. All right. Should we jump into rapid fire?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. You want odds or evens?
Give
You
me-
know what? You added that. You should do odds.
I'll do odds.
Okay.
Okay. So that means I get one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Bob. Best meal in Columbia.
Oh, this is an easy one. A Western at Booch's, or Fernando's Catfish at Murray's, or at Murray's, the linguine with clams, shrimp and mushrooms.
Wow.
He
That's a
gave
good
us
answer.
several options.
He did.
All right. If you could meet one Mizzou player or coach in person that you have never met, who would it be?
Paul Chrisman.
Pitching Paul.
Yeah.
You're not that old. You weren't here for Paul.
No,
So-
but I watched plenty of telecasts that with him with Kurt Gowdy doing
He was the announcer.
NFL game. He was the color commentator.
That's cool.
Okay. We have a time limit here on these. Don't forget. Most memorable Mizzou event you attended in person.
Ooh.
Not necessarily worked.
No.
1990 Colorado.
Steve.
Tell us about that one. Damn it, Steve.
Yeah, Tyus Edney. No, most memorable. Boy. Well, there's any number of basketball games I could pick. The triple overtime win over Illinois
Yeah.
in '93 was unbelievable. I'll tell you what, though, I'd have a hard time topping Harrison Mevis kicking that
Yeah.
field goal
Yeah.
here.
There you go.
That and the various Brady Cook moments are probably right up there.
Yeah.
That's pretty
awesome.
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Best advice that you have ever been given.
If you have to lie, don't. I don't think I ever lied to a reporter. I may not have fully answered their question, but I didn't lie to them.
So you lied by omission.
Yeah. But I felt like in my position here, I felt like I worked for the media every bit as much as I worked for the department. And, your credibility is everything. And, relationships with the media then was way different than it is today.
Yeah.
And, those guys that I dealt with as beat writers then, so many of them are still my closest friends to this day.
Yeah. I
I've
hear
heard those
about the-
beat writers can be really cool.
Yeah, well, some of them. All right. This is we're playing off of a quote Eric Morrison had in here a couple weeks ago that like really resonated with a lot of people. He said, we asked him the Missouri question, what's your favorite Mizzou memory? And he came back and said, my best Mizzou memory has yet to happen. So Bob, what is your best Mizzou moment that has yet to happen?
He finishes cleaning up the archives.
Digitize those babies. Come on.
That is yet to happen. A team national championship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In any team national championship.
Yeah.
I'd love to say football or men's basketball, but any would be fine. We've got two. We ought to have a lot more. And there were a few years when we were pretty close
Yeah.
Yeah.
in various things, but
Yeah, that would be incredible since not many people around were around for the last ones.
that's true.
Yeah, yeah. So whether it's softball, gymnastics, wrestling,
Volleyball.
volleyball, whatever it may be, I think this town wouldn't know what to do with itself.
When the 54 team won the baseball championship, the College World Series then, it was held way after school was out.
Yeah,
And the team bussed back from Omaha, but half the team never came back to Columbia. Some guys got off the bus in Kansas City. They were from there. Other guys had scattered to their summer teams. So only a handful of guys wound up getting back to Columbia. But they had a parade escorted by the police down Broadway. We've got some pictures of
yeah.
it.
That's
I think
so
I've seen
cool.
that.
For just a handful of players. That was, and I can remember some times, with big football upsets going to the airport when there were thousands of people at the airport.
Yeah.
So a national championship, it would be something else.
Okay. Well, one of those parades is going to happen. All
Yep.
4 of us are going to be there, and we'll remember this conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Final spot.
This is amazing.
Look at this photo.
This is so awesome.
Reach it. Come on, man. Volleyball player. You got the
I need you to
arm
also have
length.
long arms.
Yeah. Well.
Oh,
All right.
Bob, this is glorious.
Do we have a push pin?
Oh, shoot. Producer Steve? Remember that time we said we need to get some push pins and then we didn't?
Yeah.
That
We're running
comes
out.
Today. Yeah.
Okay.
I could.
We got some room there next to Brent.
Oh, we absolutely have room.
Yeah.
Okay, well, producer Steve looks for the push pin.
Yeah. Well, Bob, this was a lot of fun. I said a long time ago we need to have you in here. We'll probably bring you back for another time. We can reminisce about some other great moments because you've seen so many. But here we go.
Nice.
What is that? It's like a nail.
No, it's like a. I guess maybe kind of. Like a nail. Yeah.
Okay. What is this photo from? I found this. I did some Facebook sleuthing.
Whoa! Oh my God! That's when I was in college.
There you go. We
This
go.
is like a composite photo from my fraternity.
Oh, all right. Well, hey, we.
How in the world did you find that?
It's not. It wasn't that hard.
On the bulletin board.
I've got a photo to share with you guys too.
Okay, so we went old school on Bob Brendel, only appropriate. Who was the football coach that year? There you go. Uncle Al. Oh,
See if you know anybody in that photo.
heck yes. What year was this?
99.
96, 99?
It's either 98 or 99.
Man, that's the Sports Information Department.
Oh, wow.
Well, Eric Morrison's in that photo.
Yeah.
He is. Chad and Jeremy McNeve and
Camphy.
Campy. I forgot about some of those folks.
Yeah, I got here
Heather
right after.
Plum and Heidi Johnson.
I
That
got
was
here
my-
right after
That was
this
my senior year in college. So,
because Sam Fleury was our SID.
yeah,
I hired him right before I left.
yeah. Well,
I think this is in the Divine Pavilion on Football Picture Day.
oh, nice. Very
That's
nice.
so cool.
Well, Bob, this was a lot of fun. We'll have you back when we talk about that next national championship.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that's when we can talk about the flea kicker.
Ty said, Nate.
Ty said,
No. This was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bob.
This episode of Mizzou Storytellers on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast is brought to you by Shelter Insurance. Ranked number 1 in customer satisfaction for auto insurance in the Central Region by J.D. Power 5 out of the last 6 years. We're your shield. We're your shelter.
What a guy, Bob Brendel.
Man, he knows everything.
He does know everything.
He's got all
a
the
treasure
stories.
trove of history and knowledge. And I think the most popular phrase in our office is just ask Bob. Like when you get lost and you don't know something and you can't find something. I don't know. Just ask Bob. He'll find it.
Yeah, I think it was at a couple letter winners board meetings ago. I had pulled some photos for some football alumni that were having a get together in St. Louis last summer, and I pulled together some photos. I sent a list of names to Bob,
Oh, okay.
and he pulled said photos, and they were so amazed that those photos existed. They hadn't even seen some of
really?
them, and so now it's become this. Hey, maybe we can get other photos of letter winners. We can post them on social media, and I was like.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I was like,
Wow.
but for reunions, we pull photos of all the attendees and we try to do that
Yeah.
kind of a fun throwback for them when they're all mingling and seeing photos of each other. And
We're coming up on reunion season, aren't we? Or we're
We-
in reunion
we are
season.
in reunion season. Yes, we had our first indoor track reunion because we have 3 meets this year named after former coaches.
That's right.
And so we already had the Alexis Jarrett Invitational. We've got the Coach Bob Teal Invitational this weekend. And then we have the Dr. Rick McGuire Invitational next weekend.
That's right.
It really is. I told my husband, actually, I told somebody else in the office first last weekend. They said, hey, are you going to come to the basketball game or are you going to watch the Chiefs game? And I said, it's really not a matter of which one am I going to watch. It's I'm not going to go to work this weekend because I will be at work the next 7 weekends
Yeah.
straight. So I'm gonna take my family time.
There you go. Good for you.
But yeah, but this is the fun time for me. This is,
Yeah.
you get to see all the alumni. They all come back. You get to hear all the stories. it's a good time.
Yeah,
I enjoy
absolutely. Speaking of Bob's, I've got a story. So the other day, Jason Vaneski, he is our men's basketball SID, and we all know what SID stands for now, learning from Norm Stewart. And we're going through. It was when our basketball team got ranked for the first time. And we're going through online. You can track all the voters' ballots. And the person who had Mizzou ranked number 1, Jason's reading through. He's like, this guy Bob Ballou has us highest at like number 10, I believe. I'm like, Jason, story time. That's like one of my best friends, best man at my wedding. I was best man at his wedding. Oddly enough, then our next basketball game is in Austin, where Bob is the sports anchor of the CBS affiliate. So I didn't get to go, but Jason got to meet Bob, and Bob went on live TV at 6. Now this is Tuesday night, so this is last night, I guess, in our world right now. And his live guest was his former boss, one Chris Gervino.
I saw that.
Did you watch the video? So
I have not watched it. I just
watched
saw
the video.
it.
They played some old clips from KOMU back in like the 2000, 2001, 1999. And both of them much younger, obviously, and doing their thing on KOMU.
I think I've told you this story. This is like probably super embarrassing, but I remember. So I was friends with obviously other journalism students, and one of my friends, Jamil Sheard, he worked at.
I know Jamil, yeah.
Yep, he worked at KOMU, and he was friends with Bob, and I assume you. I don't know. I never heard your name, but I don't know.
I was probably there.
But this is where the story comes in. This is really funny. You were there because we would go out to different hotspots in Columbia, and he'd be like, "Oh, there's Bob Ballou," and just like Dave Matter, like in our office, it's Dave Matter, it's not Dave, and that's for me personally because it would be confusing.
Right.
But it was like, "Oh, there's Bob Ballou." I swear, no matter the temperature outside, Bob Ballou had on a leather jacket. and then he had his friend with the glasses, and that was you. You guys would like be out together.
Yeah, I
And it
didn't
was
always
like
wear
this.
glasses.
But it was like Bob Ballou and
He's
his
much
friend.
taller than me.
Yes.
So I
I
felt-
may or may not have said that we would be like, Jamil would be like, "Oh, there's Bob Ballou and his little friend."
Yeah. Well, Bob was the best man at our wedding, I should say, not just mine, Molly's wedding too. And she still gives me grief because I cried during his speech, but not at any point during the rest of the day. I still, 18 years later, our anniversary was last week, so 18 years later, I still
Oh, that's right. Happy anniversary.
catch grief for that. So,
Wasn't his wedding the one that you had to miss a Mizzou football game for?
I did at Ole Miss. In
Yeah.
Oxford. The wedding was down in San Antonio, and I dropped the ring up on the altar. Probably a bad omen. Bob won't mind saying this, but he has been since married again,
Okay.
and his second wedding was up at Lake Placid in New York.
Oh.
About, I don't know how long ago it was. He's got 2 little girls now, so it's been a while, but it was very nice. Very nice.
Were you the
ceremony.
best man in that one?
I was
too?
not. I was just I was there to have a good time for that one. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so I'm sure Bob's listening. I think he's
We'll have to make
he's still a loyal, diehard Mizzou fan, even though he's covering the Longhorns. So, but he's in our conference now. So
I know. That's so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I saw that name when it popped up, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't heard Bob Ballou in forever."
yeah. He hasn't been in Columbia in a while, but
Well, maybe now he will be.
yes, yeah. Next time the Longhorns are here.
Mhm.
All right, what else we have?
Man, I don't know. It's been so cold. I think it sounds weird. I think the cold has fried my brain. Like I went out Sunday for a run. Oh, you know what? I have begun training for my next half marathon.
When's that?
April 26th in St.
Okay.
Louis.
Wow.
I decided to do somewhere other
Just
than
a half?
Nashville.
Or you're not up for the whole thing?
Zero desire to ever do a full. None.
Too much. Too
whatsoever. Yeah, when I finished I did one of those like middle-aged women, like suburban mom things where when I turned 40, I was like, I can run a marathon. And I was like, let's start with a half. And I ran that half marathon, and I finished, and I said, there is absolutely no way I could do that again right now,
Yeah.
because that's what it felt like.
Really?
So I did that, yeah. So this will be my third one. I did Nashville twice, and I'm going to do one in St. Louis. But part of that is, I have to start my training in the winter, and it's cold. And Sunday I was like, all right, I got to get outside for a run. I'm tired of running on the treadmill. My legs, it probably took 3 hours for them to warm up.
Yeah.
Like I was under 2 blankets. I had sweatpants on. I'm on the couch, like trying not to move to conserve, the energy. And they were just, to the touch. They were cold. They were like red and splotchy. No worries. I don't have frostbite. All good. I just have very fair skin. But it was cold. But yesterday was a new level of cold, though. There was no way I was going outside to run yesterday.
I just don't even like being outside at all for anything right now. I don't even want to go out and like warm my car up or my truck up because that's 2 more minutes I have to spend out there. I'm trying to teach my 8-year-old how to warm the car up. Like, Will, here's the keys. Go up there and warm it up.
We're having like a tropical heat wave now. I think it's 34 today.
Yeah. Well, hey. You know what's awesome, though? Our Mizzou fans for men's basketball keep showing up.
Dang, yeah, they do.
Sell out, which is awesome. The weather hasn't been great. Our students just got back. But it's been so great to see that environment, return to Mizzou Arena. And even last year when we were having some struggles, the crowds were still good and the energy was there.
Students
but now
always showed up. Yeah.
Now it's been really incredible. So can't wait to get back out there again.
Yeah, I've become quite popular with people again now. Seeing if I'm
yeah,
using
wanting
my staff
tickets?
tickets. Yeah.
Yeah, parking tickets, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, high demand, which that's a good thing.
That's what I want.
Yeah,
That's what I want.
absolutely. All right, we're gonna wrap this up.
Let's do it.
Our best Mizzou memories have yet to happen. This is Mizzou Storytellers,
I'm Loretta Jones.
and I'm Dave Matter.
Talk to you next week.